Welcome everybody, and thank you for attending our launch for the AustLit Environments for Cross-Curriculum Priorities, or AECCP. Today I'm going to take you through the AECCP project and outline the content and structure of the learning environments. I'll then leave the PowerPoint behind and go into one of the learning environments to show you more closely how they work. AECCP is a space designed to support learning and teaching within the Australian Curriculum V9 cross-curriculum priorities. The project houses learning environments to provide rich, curated content and resources for teachers and librarians to help them to identify texts relevant to the 3 cross-curriculum priorities. The learning environments are also designed to support digital literacy development for students as database users. The purpose of the project has been to provide educational support for locating content related to the curriculum priorities through AustLit records. Our records forge links between literary works and subjects and essentially trace the history of a work in all of its forms and iterations. As bibliographers, this allows us to see and establish connections between the cross-curriculum priorities and Australian storytelling in all of its forms in interesting ways. For this project, we conducted lengthy and nuanced searches of our database to present data in accessible and less formalised ways. And while we have made the information more digitally inclusive and accessible by making these resources open access, the project is also an invitation to delve deeper into the database, to learn database skills yourselves, and to show students how databases can be used for both educational purposes and for choosing reading material. We had several goals for AECCP. Firstly, to provide educators with learning environments built with rich curated content from AustLit to support embedding the cross-curriculum priorities in their teaching. The project offers supplementary resources to enhance your teaching that do not require that you spend too much time combing through our vast database for information. Secondly, to provide opportunities to learn digital literacy skills using our data and through our database. Additionally, our hope was to demonstrate that data is relevant beyond the STEM disciplines. Databases are where critical information is stored, but we can help foster a solid understanding of what databases are, what they can do, and why they matter. For many young people, data is something that is only relevant to STEM disciplines. But this project dispels this myth by drawing upon AustLit's vast data to provide educators, librarians, and secondary students with a deep understanding of how data can be understood in the humanities, and to show how information about storytelling and literature specifically can be searched and synthesized for special purposes. AECCP content is designed to support the teaching of the Australian Curriculum V9 cross-curriculum priorities in secondary school classrooms. It can also be tied to the general capability of digital literacy. The majority of the resources associated with this project are aimed at teachers and librarians. Many of them are also aimed at secondary students, and many aspects of the project can be adapted to be incorporated into student-appropriate content and tasks. Any work connected to this project can be used in an English classroom. And while AustLit is primarily about Australian literature and storytelling, our database information expands beyond the obvious learning area of English and into other learning areas such as drama, languages, history, and occasionally learning areas such as mathematics, geography, and dance. There are 3 learning environments in AECCP to reflect the 3 cross-curriculum priorities, including Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander histories and cultures, Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia, and sustainability. A learning environment is a project space that presents AustLit data as curated content for educational purposes. To develop the environments, we conducted complex searches, collected data through the database, and made connections between resources on your behalf. In this way, the learning environments present data in more accessible formats. In each learning environment, we have identified titles and resources relevant to the particular cross-curriculum priority to provide contextual information. The titles and resources we identify through AustLit database searches are contextualized with author biographical details and other information, as well as teaching ideas, content descriptions, and external teaching resources where possible. We also provide links to explore the work further in the database. Each learning environment contains a specific set of features, which I will outline in more detail shortly. The components of the learning environments include suggested texts for incorporating cross-curriculum priorities, organising ideas, digital literacy exercises using AustLit data, examples of AustLit data visualised and accompanied by additional digital literacy exercises, reading suggestions around the curriculum priorities, and links to additional related AustLit content relevant to the project. Okay, Bianca, if you just want to skip through to the next one. There we go. The largest part of each learning environment is the sections dedicated to the organising ideas for the cross-curriculum priorities. As such, the structure for the learning environment is informed by the curriculum web content for the cross-curriculum priorities. As you know, the 3 priorities each contain sets of organising ideas grouped around contextualising themes. For example, the cross-curriculum priority Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia contains 3 organising ideas, which are knowing Asia and its diversity, understanding Asia's global significance, and growing Asia-Australia engagement. In the curriculum, these themes contain their own organising ideas, which are then linked to learning areas by content descriptions. Our aim has been to suggest text for embedding and teaching specifically to the organising ideas. For each organising idea, we have identified a number of suggested texts. Because we are a database about storytelling and literature, the number of suggested texts per organising idea varies depending on the organising idea itself and the number of reasonable connections we can make between our data and learning areas. For example, there will be more suggested texts for English than there are for design and technologies or science. So how did we identify relevant texts? We approached the project in the first instance through the cross-curriculum priorities themselves, rather than through a learning area or a text. So we accessed the curriculum online, chose a priority, then looked at each organising idea. Within the organising ideas, we examined the learning areas and then the content descriptions to determine if there was relevancy to our database. So you can see on the slide here the process. We looked at sustainability, then the organising idea worldviews, then worldviews SW2, for example, learning area English, and then the content description. So looking more closely at this organising idea, it states, identify and explore ideas, points of view, characters, events and/or issues in literary texts drawn from historical, social and/or cultural contexts by First Nations Australian and wide-ranging Australia and world authors. It comes with the elaboration, exploring depictions of the city or the bush in Australian poems and short stories from different eras. So clearly this is very relevant to our database as we record Australian storytelling in all of its forms. And we also house the Black Words dataset, which records writing by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders. Now, to identify a text that could be directly connected to this organising idea broadly and the content description specifically, we conducted a search of the database. In this instance, we searched for short stories about the bush in the Black Words dataset. Now, this retrieved over 130 results, We then explored the results, focusing primarily on works that are recently published and therefore likely to be readily available in libraries and bookstores. So the top result here, Vermin Proof Fence, which is a short story by Rick Slager, was chosen as a suggested text to use within the sustainability priority as a match to this particular organising idea and content description. So if you are trying to meet a very specific element of the curriculum, this project is a great way to meet that need. The suggested texts are accompanied by information largely curated from our database, including an introduction to the work, author details, publication information, themes, and teaching ideas and resources, which might be either internal to AustLit or developed externally, such as through Reading Australia or publishers' websites. The suggestions are accompanied by reader advisory information, links to AustLit records related to the work, and one or two links to media about the text, such as a podcast interview with the author or a YouTube clip. We provided this for each suggestion. Each learning environment contains a section on using AustLit data to support digital literacy development. Secondary students are bombarded by information via the internet and sometimes lack the skills to understand not only if the information is authoritative and reliable, but also how the information is collected, synthesized, and disseminated, nor how it could be used to enhance their study. The digital literacy space of the learning environments demonstrates how storytelling and literature data, that is humanities data as opposed to STEM data, and database searching can be used to develop digital literacy. The first section introduces predetermined searches that can be used for exploring and finding other texts related to the cross-curriculum priorities in Australian literature through AustLit. These searches could be adapted as research topics to develop digital literacy skills through the database. The second section provides 2 exercises per learning environment to support database skill development. These exercises are designed to help students use the AustLit database to return specific targeted results. In the visual data component of the learning environments, we provide case studies of visualized data to demonstrate its usefulness as part of digital literacy. There are distinct visual data exercises for each learning environment. The sustainability learning environment centers on creating GIFs using book covers with a case study of young adult fiction and climate change. The Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia learning environment focuses on turning statistical data into a visual graph. The case study in this instance is works about the Vietnam War and Vietnamese people. And the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Histories and Cultures learning environment contains networked data visualizations that can be used for exploring data on Indigenous storytelling and demonstrate how visual data can be used as a research tool. There are also additional digital literacy exercises and general how-tos for searching AustLit with video content embedded on the main project page. The fourth component of the learning environments contains some recommendations for recreational or directed reading related to the cross-curriculum priorities. It also identifies examples of authors writing on the subject. And while these suggestions can be used by students as reading ideas, they can also be used by teachers around which to develop class lessons to explore author biographical material or texts around particular subjects. The remaining section across each learning environment is AustLit content and databases related to the curriculum priorities, which could be used as a further resource for teaching and learning. So, for example, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander learning environment links out to the Blackwords calendar, which also has some has been recently updated and also now contains its own lesson plans. In addition, the Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia Learning Environment contains a section on finding information about Australian stories in Asian languages. And again, the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Histories and Cultures Learning Environment contains an additional 2 sections, one with resources created by First Nation educators to aid the teaching of Indigenous content and embedding Indigenous perspectives, and another on finding information about stories in Indigenous languages in the database. So these might be translations or bilingual texts or texts in, say, Wiradjuri language. I'll just mention one more thing about the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Histories and Cultures Learning Environment. All of the suggested texts contained in this learning environment are by First Nations authors only, or co-authored by First Nations writers. And for the purposes of today's demonstration, I'm going to take you through the Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia learning environment. Incidentally, this cross-curriculum priority also has the least direct links to English, according to the priority section of the website and how we navigated through that process. So you'll be able to see how much we've been able to provide for you in spite of that, that connection. Okay, just give me a moment to set this up. Bear with me. Okay. Before I go onto our project, I just want to briefly revisit how we approached making connections with the content through the curriculum. Obviously, we start here with the curriculum priorities. We choose a priority and then worked our way through the organising ideas and then addressed each learning area, examining content descriptions and finding connections that way. Okay, over to AECCP. On our main project page here, you can see the menu on the left, which has a couple of different elements. It has an outline of the learning environments and the structure, much of which I've discussed here today, and sections on searching with AustLit and additional digital literacy content. And on the right, here, we have the learning environments. So I'm just going to take you to the Asia and Australia's engagement with Asia. On each of the learning environment opening pages, we have a review of the contents and a specific outline of how it meets the curriculum, how it aligns to the curriculum. Again, the main menu on the left. The first sections are the organising ideas I mentioned before. So as I said, knowing Asia and its diversity, understanding Asia's global significance, and growing Asia-Australia engagement. Okay. So here we revisit the organising idea itself and explain how it's met in this learning environment. So looking at this first organising idea here, AAK1, is stated as people of the Asia region are diverse in backgrounds, experiences, stories, and religions. And below these statements across each of the learning environments, we identify which learning areas we have suggested texts for. So for AAK1, for example, we have English, dance, drama, health and phys ed, civics and citizenship, and Chinese. So just looking at, I'll open up the first one here, Tiger Daughter. So first we just have a synopsis of the story, some brief information about the author, and we mention here publication details. Now, in cases where there are various editions of text that we think are relevant, so in this instance, we've mentioned that there is a dyslexic edition and an audiobook available for students who may need those kinds of works. We also mention the genre, cover the themes, and for some texts we have provided some features of interest. So the chapters in The Tiger Daughter, for instance, contain title chapters in English and Chinese Mandarin. Beyond the features of interest, we have some teaching ideas, just a few in this instance, and make links out to external teaching resources if they are available in our database. So these might be teaching notes by publishers or Reading Australia material. This is then followed by content descriptions. So these are the descriptions that we found going through that process I showed you before, and we have linked the text specifically to those descriptions. So in this case, we have linked Tiger Daughter to English for years 7, Health and Phys Ed for 7 to 10, and Chinese for years 7 to 8. Following on from the content descriptions, there is some reader advisory information. So this mentions the publisher's recommendations for years and any notes that may, any content that is notable, we will mention here as a form of trigger warning, I suppose. We then provide links that take you into the database if you wish, and then links to some media. So there might be some podcast interviews or some YouTube clips, some book trailers, that sort of thing. So obviously these content descriptions are part of the F to 10 or 7 to 10 curriculum and don't apply in the same way to senior secondary curriculum. However, all of the suggested texts in these learning environments can also be used for senior years. So you can see the rich information here that we've pulled together from our data about the work and associated with each of the suggested texts. We made specific connections to the cross-curriculum priorities. Okay, I'm just going to close this tile here. And you can see the different types of resources here. So Tiger Daughter is a novel, but we have drama here, a graphic novel. Twisted Elegance is a short story, and there are a few anthologies there of autobiographical stories. These tiles, they can be used as resource. They're mainly used for resources for educators, but they can also be used to students to demonstrate the interconnectedness of stories and data across websites and the database and other forms of media like YouTube or a podcast. So moving on now to using AustLit data to support digital literacy. On this page, you can see we have some guided searches and exercises to support the development of database skills. We have links as well to conducting searches if you are not already familiar with the database. They're housed on the main project page. So these ideas are results lists that students can practice with to learn how to use the database, how to read a record, and understand how records link to each other. And down below we have some exercises specifically to support digital literacy classes. So we have one here for years 7 to 9 around the anthology Growing Up Asian in Australia. And the one aimed at years 10 to 12 is designed around conducting more complex searches. And it's about searching our database for books in certain regions. So works that might be set in Japan or Korea or something like that. We then also outline in what ways these lesson plans meet the curriculum in terms of general capabilities. So we have digital literacy here and any relevant learning areas such as digital technologies and in this instance, history. Okay. Now for the moment, I'm just going to skip over the visual data section of this learning environment because I want to show you something very exciting at the end. So we also have the recreational reading section and additional content that I'll allow you to explore in your own time. And lastly, we have the literature in Asian languages section. So for this part of the learning environment, we have provided search instructions to help students and teachers and librarians work through the processes of finding works to use in languages classrooms. So these might be bilingual texts, works first published in a language other than English, or translations of works. So we have the searching instructions here for language and the video content, which just works through, it just demonstrates how to conduct the search. And though it doesn't have sound, it does have captions to support going through the video. There's additional information here about searching specifically for translations. And again, we have the video content for you. And below that, exercises for searching for works in specific languages. So in this instance, we have Chinese, Hindi, Korean, Vietnamese, and Japanese. Okay, just moving on to the final part now. I'm going to hop over to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders histories and cultures learning environment to look at some visual data. Okay. So for this section of the visual data, I'm going to show you a networked map, which visualizes how all of our data is connected in the database. There are 3 maps. There is one for Wiradjuri and Noongar and Yolngu. They show interconnections between authors and illustrators, playwrights, and so on, and organizations like publishers. I'm just going to open up on the larger screen here. Okay, so this is a visualization of Wiradjuri authors in our database. And organized. But we can also conduct specific searches. So you'll see at the top, you have a network that you can choose from, and this spot here to search for an agent. So because this is a Wiradjuri network, I'm just going to look at Anita Heiss. Okay, and there's Anita there. Now her network through this data looks large and extensive. We have connections here with Simon and Schuster, Audible, PlayLab, Magabala Books, and again a connection with Sandy Sullivan, Cordite Press. Yeah, it just goes on. So using this visual data as a research tool, we can discuss and examine important issues associated with publishing trends and First Nations works. And it also shows how vastly prolific some authors are and the wealth of knowledge out there. This network map has a lesson plan with accompanying digital literacy exercises, as do the other visual data exercises for the other 2 learning environments. This is an excellent way for students to familiarise themselves with this type of visual data and also to explore Indigenous literature data in an interesting way. So leaving you here with this exciting visualization, I want to thank you for listening to the overview of this project and for your patience, as I said, cross-curriculum priorities over and over again. Thanks, Maggie.